All right, so this video is going to be about the installation of the gate that is located between my house and my neighbor's house. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we did was that we came right next to the wall where we were going to put the post, and we cleared out the soil. And what we were looking for, we were either looking for stucco or the slab that might have permeated out from against the wall underneath that would interfere with how far down the post was going to go. And we did find that we did have to knock out some of the stucco with a sledgehammer and a chisel. You can see that the depth that we went down was just slight. It was just under soil level. That's about an inch and a half, just to prevent anything, either bugs or water, from getting up in there and rotting the wood that we were going to place inside. The next thing we did was check for verticalness of the walls and squareness. And as you can see, the walls are not perfectly straight, at least here in Florida with the stucco. But as long as they're close to vertical and close to perpendicular with the ground, you should be good to go with putting a post up against it. Once we verified we had clearance at ground level and that the post would be vertical against the wall, we put together our parts list. And for parts, the major components that we had to purchase was the vertical post. Those come individually. We had to purchase the gate kit, which came with all the hardware on the gate, except for the drop rod. That had to be purchased separate. And then we had to purchase a fence kit, and that's where all the vertical beams come from, because the gate kit only comes with hardware and the vertical posts on the gate and the horizontal posts on the gate. In addition to all the gate hardware, for the posts that attach to the wall, we needed 1-bys in order to reinforce them. And so what we did is, inside of this, we put 2 1-bys cut to size appropriately and then silicone onto the walls to reinforce the mounting between the wall and the post, and between the gate hardware and the post. Taking a closer look inside this post, we can see how the 1-bys were cut to size. The 1-bys were also fastened using screws to one another. And then when that was completed, there was silicone applied to both sides of the wood, and then it was inserted into the post. That was done at approximately the same time that we came out and actually put the post up against the wall and screwed the screws through the post into the wall. And that ensures a good silicone bond. With the wood posts inside the wall, these screws that hold on the gate hardware are screwed into the wood, adding reinforcement so that the gate itself stays relatively level and doesn't shear off and crack the post. The posts are screwed to the wall using a 3 1/4 inch tap gun. And the way we did that was we drilled through the post with a Forstner bit, a 1.5 inch hole. This is currently capped, but that hole allowed us access to the inside of the post. A total of 6 holes were drilled for 6 fasteners. Those holes were only drilled through the face of the post to allow access to the back of the post. The back of the post had a much smaller hole drilled through it. That hole was only drilled the size of the anchor that was going to go into the concrete. Once we had a hole in the back of the post, we could mark where the anchors would need to be. We started off with the top 2, and we just marked where those would need to be. Once we drilled out the concrete using a concrete bit in order to fit this through, and remember, there's a little piece of wood in here, so it only had to go about 2 3/4 inch in. Then we went through here with the bit attached to a socket and drilled it into the wall. Once we had that, we could then use the holes that we made down below to once again drill through the back using a much smaller bit and mark the locations of the additional screws that would have to be applied. Then we took the post off the wall and routed out those holes using a concrete bit for the additional screws, at which point we put the post back up against the wall, and then we screwed all 6 down. All throughout that process, we ensured that those holes that we drilled would not interfere with the gate hardware. And so from the very beginning, we planned out how high or how low the gate hardware would be on the post, and then we marked out where we would put our holes for the anchors. To finish the post, we purchased these PVC caps that basically just clip straight into the 1 inch hole that we drilled. It took a little bit of muscle to get them in, but they snapped right in and they do not come out. I suspect if I had to remove one of these, I might break it. With the posts both reinforced and attached to the walls, it was time to start on the gates. So we would need to build these individual gate sections using the hardware that we bought from the store for both the fence columns and the gate kit itself. The question is how wide would each one of these fences need to be? We knew that the distance at the bottom of the posts was 110 inches. However, at the top of the post, it was only 109 inches. So we had a small disparity that we had to account for. We also knew that we needed to account for the gap in the sides of the fence that allows the hinges to move, and the gap in the middle of the fence that allows the latching hardware to latch. We assumed that the hinges would need about a ½ inch gap in order to function properly. For the latch, we assumed that about 3/4 of an inch would be required for it to operate properly. Making it easy on ourselves, we just assumed that the total gap that we would need at all three places was about 2 inches. And considering we were about 109 inches at the top across, we took 107 inches, divided it by 2, and assumed that each one of the doors would have to be 53.5 inches wide. At that point, we read the instructions for the door and we cut the horizontal members at the top and the bottom of the door to the appropriate length. We then inserted them into one side of the vertical members. At that point, we started putting the vertical slats into the door, noting that they have a starter strip to account for the tongue and groove shape of the door panels. We worked across the door panel by panel until we came to the very end, and then we needed to make a fine cut using a table saw on the final piece. And so that took a lot of fitting between the vertical and the horizontal columns and the individual panel slice. And we form fitted it together several times to make sure it was roughly perfect when we finally inserted it. We duplicated that process for the other door. At that point, the doors were ready for mounting, and the question was, where did the hinges go? We applied the hinges at a point where there was a lot of reinforcement inside from this horizontal member and from the vertical member at the same point. So we put both hinges at that intersection, top and bottom. Starting with one gate, we brought it outside and we put it into position, and we put a wood beam underneath it and leveled that beam as best we could. At that point, with the entire hardware for the hinge attached to the sides at the top and bottom, we marked the required holes for screwing in the hinges. We then screwed in the post side of the hinges, 3 in the front and 3 on the inside for both the top and bottom. At that point, the door was mounted. We duplicated the same process with the other door, putting a wood beam underneath, making sure it was relatively level, checking the gap in the middle, and then fastening in both of the hinges. With the latches and hinges installed, we could finish up the post by putting the 2 post caps on. Then we could put our attention to the drop rods. We went with 2 drop rods so that either door could be propped open or both doors could be propped open at the same time. The gate that has the female latch on it was given a more permanent drop rod with a ground holder, which is just a outdoor or electrical PVC tube that is 1 inch in diameter, about 1 foot long, and hammered down into the ground almost 3/4 of a foot to 1 foot deep. The drop rod then sits inside that and holds the door stable and closed and permits the moving door to latch when opened and closed. And that wraps up everything we did to install this gate between our houses. I hope this helps, and as always, good luck.